Something recently clicked in my brain: Photoshop just isn't it anymore. I want this channel to be about creativity in general. So today I'm gonna go out of my comfort zone and try something I know absolutely nothing about. 3D printing. 3D printing is something I've always been secretly curious about, but well, I didn't always have the time and money to spend, so I never really got into it until I quite impulsively bought a 3D printer, the Bambu Lab P1P for those interested. And I intend to make something very specific for my first project. Many of you may know I really like action figures and statues based on movies, but then how cool would it be if you can make one yourself and not have to spend $1,000? I myself am no 3D artist. I have very limited knowledge about that. So for this first project, I'm just gonna use an existing 3D model. However, that still leaves the preparing, gluing, priming, painting, sanding to me for me to figure out. But that is kind of the part I'm most excited about anyway, just turning a raw 3D print into something premium looking. The bar is set pretty high, especially considering the fact I've never done anything like this before. Let's get started. Of course, I wasn't gonna go in completely blind, so first I printed some random bullshit to kind of figure out how it all works. I was surprised by how smooth these came out right away. It was very promising. The software that comes with the printer is insanely easy to use. It is super straightforward. I did watch one tutorial to make sure I didn't miss anything, but I got the hang of it in like under 20 minutes. You probably already know this from the title or thumbnail, but for this first figure I'm gonna do a xenomorph, the alien design from, well, the Alien movies. I'm a big fan of them, and the new movie really did something for me to kind of get hyped again. So, well, this particular model is the one I chose. Big shout out to 3D Claus, who masterfully created this model. Insane. I am super excited. The model came in parts as expected, which I then have to glue together in real life. I wanted my statue to be nice and big, so I scaled up the whole thing to 200%. How big it actually ends up being then? I guess we'll have to see. Some parts could be printed out together on a single plate, like most of the actual alien parts. After aligning everything the way I wanted, I sliced my print, adding necessary supports to the model. Obviously, you can't print mid-air, so some areas need supports to keep it in place. Then really, all that's left to do is select the printer, which I called Benny's Bamboo Beast, and click print and see what happens. Looking back, I should have probably played around a bit more with the supports. I feel like the amount of supports on some areas are just a tad excessive, but hey, at least the prints came out well, and that's most important. It is very satisfying to pick up the finished print and peel it off the plate. Here especially, you can tell some of these supports are kind of a waste of filament. Some errors had occurred too, like this pipe being cut off completely, which I think is also a result of incorrect supports. Since it's not part of the actual alien design though, I don't really care. I'll just pretend like it's meant to be broken up. Something I learned pretty quickly is that the orientation of elements is crucial to how smooth it comes out. They are horizontal layers, and so the top and bottom are naturally gonna look the worst. I did some experimenting, and you can instantly tell which part was oriented flat or standing up. I actually reprinted the legs because of this. I found they'd look much smoother in this upright position. After tens upon tens of hours of printing, I finally have all the pieces I need printed. And this is where I began questioning whether or not I made it too big, because this is the head, and that is literally like only that part of the whole print. So it's gonna be something.
Meanwhile,
the team over at Envato Elements were kind enough to sponsor this project as well, and today more than ever it seems really appropriate because this video is packed with their assets. From stock video I used to overlays to many sound effects and music. Like literally half the music in this video is from Envato Elements because they have this really specific trailer kind of music, like this, which is perfect for these videos. Of course, they have plenty of stuff for Photoshop and graphic design as well, but since the majority of what I use is this, I thought I would highlight that today. I don't think, and I mean this, I have ever looked for something that I couldn't find on Envato Elements. It's just all the right things in one place. And now, if you want unlimited access to their entire library for only $16 a month, you have yourself an annual subscription. Don't miss out, check the link down below, and then I guess right now, let's move on to the next step. The final model would need a crazy amount of sanding, so I wanted to kind of get familiar with that process. For that, I used this Pokemon skull. I bought loads of different kinds of sandpaper, files, glue, and putty, which all would later come in handy for the final figure. This will all be a lot of trial and error, but that's kind of the fun thing about all this. I also tried the priming already, and all of that combined made it look quite smooth indeed. It may not be perfect, but definitely good enough for a first try. Now on to the alien. I began at the beginning, the sanding. The idea is to keep sanding the smooth areas with sandpaper that gets progressively finer in hopes of getting a really clean, smooth finish. I figured, by the way, that I best first do all the sanding and then assemble the whole thing together. It's clearly much easier to access certain areas with tools. That seems a pain to do when it's all put together. Some areas really needed this sanding, as you could clearly see the layers stacked on top of each other. Torso in particular was bad, and I couldn't really fix it properly as there were just too many tiny details and cracks I couldn't reach. At least it's a little better though. Some areas in general just weren't as important to me, and they're also kind of hard to get to, like the rock texture and the little in-between spots. I really just tried a bunch of different things, trying to hold myself back from doing it perfectly. After all, this is the first time I'm doing something like this. It's kind of stupid to think it's gonna be perfect. I gotta say though, I never thought I'd be filing the nails of an alien on this channel, but here we are. I finally got to the point where I was satisfied enough, so on to the next very exciting step, putting the whole figure together. The order in which I did this mattered a lot, especially for the base. I used this Loctite 2-part plastic glue and tried to put the pieces together. Now watch me struggle trying to click the head onto the torso.
Two hours later.
Not all pieces needed glue, they just snapped together very tightly, but the whole base and most of the limbs definitely needed some glue. Somehow though, one of the feet actually didn't fit, so I needed to cut off some toes to make it work. Then after quite some work, I could finally witness its true scale in real life. Don't get me wrong, it's far from smooth, but I'm still very happy with how it looks so far. Mostly the base is a little rough and all the cracks and crevices I couldn't get to. Luckily the whole thing is pretty darn big, so overall I still think it looks fantastic. Besides, the filler primer might help to make this a little smoother as well, so let's just cut straight to that. Before applying the actual primer, I first used this plastic putty to fill in the cracks between the separate printed pieces. The skull sadly had cracked a little, so using that I tried to fix it. Looks hideous of course like this, but the primer and paint is gonna fix this later. I'm using this particular primer for those who are interested, and well, spraying it on gently for the first coat. I could yap on about what specific technique I used, but let's be real, it's not that deep. I just sprayed it on. The only important thing I guess is to not spray it on too thick or too close to the model. It might end up dripping off, that of course we don't want. After this first layer dried up, I noticed some cracks weren't filled up completely, so again I used my plastic putty to refill them. After which, guess what? Another layer of primer. Now it was starting to look a little better already. On TikTok of all places, somehow the algorithm already knows what I'm doing. I found a pretty cool way to add some extra texture for rock surfaces with this exact putty I'm using. Using a rough old brush, I applied some of it in hopes it kind of hides some of the visible printing layers as well. Then onto the final layer of primer to finish off this step, and I gotta say, so far, it is looking pretty clean. Not perfect maybe, but pretty clean. Now comes the part I am most scared of. The painting. There are tons of paints, techniques, things to know about painting figures. And I'm out here starting from scratch. Don't get me wrong, I did educate myself a little bit by watching some tutorials and TikToks and whatnot, but still doing it for yourself the first time is quite something. So, well, let's get into it. Using this acrylic black spray paint, I applied the first coat, black. Seems a bit counterintuitive since it was black to begin with, but granted it's a lot smoother now and there's loads of black and dark tints in the original alien designs, it is simply necessary. Surprisingly so, this actually made it look even smoother as the paint was quite thick. It definitely filled in some of those extra little gaps. Also, don't judge my lack of fashion here, this is an old shirt that can get dirty. I got myself some decent but affordable acrylic paints and brushes for this particular project. I of course don't know yet if this will be a thing or not, so let's not overspend just yet. As far as the painting process goes, I struggled doing this in any logical order or even film everything properly, as it was just one big experiment for me. Sometimes I tried stuff only to find out that it didn't work, or something did work and I forgot to record it. It's basically just one big mess, so I'm not gonna go into specifics. Besides, this of course isn't a tutorial at all, just me having a crack at it. One specific technique I will elaborate on, where the underground is black, then using a sponge or brush with very little paint on it so you can loosely go over the top of the surface. This leaves the black in the crevices but adds some highlights to the top layers. You can of course do multiple layers of this, each time applying less pressure to create a kind of color gradient. For rocks in particular, this works wonders, but later for the alien itself, it would also come in quite handy. I do have to say, this whole entire thing took multiple tries of the same thing to get it right. At first, it all looked very similar and flat, only for me to later get a result I was more satisfied with. And I won't lie, it's still kind of messy at the end. I did naturally underestimate how difficult this would be, but I do also have to be fair to myself and be happy with the way it worked at all, because it's definitely not bad. Something that would really help for that final bit of realism was applying varnish to that dome element of the skull. You often see this part be more shiny than the rest, and this would make it stand out beautifully. And well, after all that printing, assembling, priming and painting, we have finally arrived to the conclusion of this video. I am very happy with the result. I would be lying if I said I was 100% satisfied, but overall I shouldn't complain. Mostly the painting was the difficult part, everything else went pretty smoothly actually. But somehow that first black spray paint coat made it look a bit plasticky, a bit cheap somehow, which eventually made me hesitant to maybe put the varnish all over the alien creature instead of just the top of the skull. This could potentially make it look more shiny and therefore more premium-ish. I also completely forgot to add the inner jaw, so I did that as well off screen, but I just kind of shoved it in there, so it's nothing quite special. Overall, I would also say the alien itself is a bit too brown. It almost looks a bit more like the runner alien from Alien 3, but I don't know. Let's just call it an artistic choice. Overall, this project has been insane to work on, but we're actually not even fully done for today. Remember this video where I turned a figure into like a cool poster? Let's do that again with our own figure this time. Let's get into it. While I cook up a quick little design, let me explain where all of this even came from to begin with. Because I already know some of you guys are wondering, are you really just gonna abandon Photoshop like that? Is this channel gonna be 3D printing now? Well, there's no easy answer to those. Is it just gonna be 3D printing? No. The reason I changed my slogan to making cool shit is because I wanted to branch out into different things. I would love for this channel to be like a creative hub for all sorts of crafts, whether that be Photoshop, printing cool figures, or anything else I can think of. It's why I started doing slightly different projects too, such as the Pokemon card video or the Lego box art. Hell, that Fury short film kind of thing. That is what I love to do, trying out different things and just seeing what happens. Everybody knows by now my channel has never been educationally focused. Yes, I have made a few tutorials, but those were always just kind of the exception. And well, I still stand by that, the same way that this video isn't a tutorial, it's just me learning it myself as you watch. Now, this video has taken weeks, maybe even months to make, and I think you can tell how much that changes the final output. I didn't worry about any sort of deadline, I didn't feel rushed, just coolness at my own pace. And I think that's what made my channel special in the first place, that original quality and energy that I get when I really put my soul into something. That's gone away with Photoshop, and it'll just end up being the same systematic thing again with barely anything new or unique brought to the table. That no more. From now on, expect anything, whether that be creating a music video or cosplay creation or sometimes, sometimes Photoshop. I want it all to be possible here, so that's what I'm gonna do. I might upload less frequently, which, let's be honest, I haven't been doing that anyway, but trust me that if I do drop something, it will be worth your time. And well, all of that being said, here's the result for this alien poster. I want to thank you guys for sticking around for this long if you're still watching. It means, honestly, a lot. Same goes for Envato Elements. Huge thanks once again to them for sponsoring this video. And then I guess for today, that is pretty much it. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell not to miss a single future video. And I hope I'll see you in the next one.